So we'll have the second round of flash talks now. They're already all standing here, so this will be for the posters that we actually have today. Anyone?
Hi, everyone. My name is Aarthi. I'm a postdoc in the Schmidt Center, and I'm going to be presenting on this project. One underappreciated aspect of single-cell foundation models is the potential for cross-modality transfer learning. Here, we designed a framework to transfer information from single-cell to bulk transcriptomic data, a modality which lacks cellular resolution, but is more typically a component of clinical care due to financial, conceptual, and computational constraints. We fine-tuned transcriptomic foundation models with paired single-cell and pseudobulk samples to preserve patient-level similarity defined by cell-type proportion signals on the cell ontology graph. Compared to encoders without this single-cell level training, our approach improves cohort integration and cell-type proportion preservation in simulated bulk tumors. We also better predict immunotherapy response in bulk melanoma tumors, and using a single-cell melanoma atlas, identify individual cells with higher association in bulk responders. To discuss this preliminary work, please see me at poster 22. Thank you.
All right, hello everyone. So my name is Yuanqi Du, and I just recently graduated from Cornell and moved to Boston. Today, my poster is about agents. I heard a lot of discussion about agents here at the symposium, but my poster is concerned about, okay, what are the agents we should build, and how to make them useful, right? And it has to come from the scientific discovery workflow that we have been laying on for decades. We start with scientific discovery inquiry, and we've been building good computational tools to have, and every computational tools are imperfect, to searching the hypothesis, cast them as a search optimization problem. On the other side, have computational tools to validate, to make the projections on what can be validated. And one thing that agent should be used is exactly to automate this loop, to define the verifiers, figuring out what are from the imperfect computational tools to figure out what aligns with what we want through the goals. And so very much a generalist from across many tasks. If you want to know more about it, come to my poster at the ID number 23. Yeah. Thanks.
Hi everyone, my name is Anush. I work at Harvard with George Church, and today I'm going to talk to you about biosynthesis of non-standard amino acids with AI. Life is based on two sequence-encoded molecular alphabets: nucleobases that underlie DNA and RNA, and amino acids that underlie proteins. We can combine the biochemistry of these two monomers in a single molecule called a nucleobase amino acid. These molecules are not accessible with enzymes yet. We teamed up with the Regina Barzilai lab to discover the enzymes for biosynthesis of these nucleobase amino acids. And I'm very happy to say that we have now the 5 letters of DNA and RNA available at the protein level. If you want to learn more about the AI pipeline that we developed for the discovery of these enzymes, come to see my poster 24, and I'm very happy to talk with you. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. I'm Sanketh. I'm a postdoc at the Schmidt Center. So today, I'm going to talk about multimodal characterization of sleep as a phenotype in neurodevelopmental conditions. So sleep is a very interesting period in the day because it has many regulatory processes that go on during sleep. And secondly, it provides a window where behavior takes no effect, like everything is calm, and so it provides a very good source for extracting physiological signals from humans. So real-world sleep phenotyping is challenging, especially when you are dealing with children with autism disorder. So in this work, we are going to talk about, we analyze data from a large multimodal study on sleep conducted on 200 children with autism, and we have several observations on how, discussing several challenges of both the tools and the experimental methodology. So come see my poster if you're interested. Yeah.
my name is Tamara Perez. I am gastroenterology and candidate to bioinformatician. Most of the inflammatory bowel disease study in microbiome has focused in the abundance of the species. But what happened with the interaction among the species? To explore that, we focus in fungal species, and we started with differential abundance analysis, and with 3 different methods, and we found a species in at least 2 methods. We use it to build a machine learning model, and as the model working well, we follow it with a Bayesian network. We found some huge species in each state of the mucosa. Finally, we integrate the fungal data with the clinical data and the bulk RNA-seq, and we performed a weighted co-expression network analysis. We found model associated to the inflammatory status of the mucosa, and also we correlate this model with some species that were associated significantly with these inflammatory models. For more details, please visit my poster. Thank you.
Hi everyone, my name is Claire. I'm currently a senior at MIT in the Euler Lab. Today I'll be talking about CRIMP, which quantifies subcellular gene expression patterns. So currently we have imaging-based spatial transcriptomics data. However, it's quite sparse per cell, even though it is high resolution. And we also have cells that have irregular shapes. So thus here we propose a sign distance function-based effective radius that is a 1D coordinate system, allowing us to understand radial expression profiles of these genes. Using these profiles, we show that we can find functional relevance in genes with similar spatial localizations. And we also show that if we have different cell types, we can systematically identify differentially localized genes. Thank you. Come see me at poster 28 if you're interested.
Hello everyone, I'm Jiageng Wu from Brigham and Women's Hospital and Harvard Medical School. Our study is about benchmarking large language model in clinical test understanding. Nowadays, we all know large language models are promising to improve medical research and clinical care. But currently, many of these evaluations are based on medical examination and PubMed literature. They are not the real-world clinical tests, so they are failed to reflect the complexity and diversity of real-world clinical settings. So that's why we need to construct such a bridge benchmark. We collect many publicly accessible clinical tests from the different sources and try to construct 87 clinical tasks to construct our benchmark. This benchmark covers the 9 language and 8 different task types to support diverse clinical test understanding. So we also systematically evaluate about 100 large language models in our benchmark to provide a comprehensive leaderboard to track the model performance change during the different times. So we also find many interesting findings with the many different task types and many different large language models. If you are also interested in applying large language model in clinical medicine, please find me in poster 29. Thanks.
Hello. Hello, my name is Cass, and I'll be presenting on behalf of Tima El Haji and Tariq Dauda from UM6P in Morocco. They couldn't make it today. So here we present SC Boost, an enhancement framework for deep learning single-cell RNA-seq harmonization tools. And as shown in figure A, SC Boost works by inserting novel adaptive layers inside pre-existing models, and it improves dataset integration and conservation of biological information. In figure C, we show SC Boost applied to single-cell gen, and it improves integration and presentation of cell type identity on both HART and PBMC datasets, thus potentially able to preserve rare cell populations across samples. Applying SC Boost to single-cell blood dataset from patients who develop myocarditis after checkpoint inhibitor therapy, we identified a rare cell population of granzyme K-positive cycling cytotoxic CD8 T cells with significant association with fatality in patients who later developed checkpoint inhibitor-induced myocarditis. This shows how SC Boost can help identify rare cell populations with clinical potential, and we invite you to check out poster number 30 for more details. Thank you.
Hi everyone, I'm Zhilei Bei, a PhD student at MIT EECS. In this work, we explore how protein language models can be leveraged to learn task-specific fitness landscapes and optimize a protein sequence for desired functionality under extremely limited labeled data. Previous methods train a scoring model on top of latent embeddings extracted from the hidden layers of a pre-trained protein language model, which requires training a regression head from scratch. In contrast, we directly fine-tune a language modeling head to increase the likelihood of high fitness variants and penalize low fitness ones. Evaluated on deep mutational scanning datasets in protein gym, our likelihood fine-tuning approach significantly outperforms regression-based methods in predicting the fitness of sequence variants under extremely data-scarce scenarios. For more details, feel free to stop by poster 31. Thank you.
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Evan Groover, and I'm a plant biologist at a new postdoc in the Mary Gehring lab at the Whitehead Institute. I'm here to tell you today about my work generating large machine learning interpretable data sets for improving crops, especially for climate adaptation and food security. If you come to my poster, number 32, I'll tell you about some of my PhD work at UC Berkeley, where we built the largest, or heretofore largest, functional genomic screen in plant primary tissue. Used it to actually empirically improve photosynthesis in crops by altering cis regulation, and then also validate and benchmark a state-of-the-art genomic language model in collaboration with the Yuanqi laboratory at Berkeley. I'll also tell you about some of my sort of future directions, wherein we are building a population-level multi-omic atlas in Arabidopsis in the hopes of improving nutritional yield in those many crops that have not benefited from domestication and crop improvement. I'd love to talk to you about the indispensable role that ML will play in improving crops and solving humanity's biggest problems at poster 32. Thank you.
Hi everyone, my name's Ada. I'm a PhD student at Harvard University. Today I'll be sharing about Atomica, a model that learns universal representations of intermolecular interactions. The motivation behind Atomica was really that current models capture molecules in isolation. However, what is fundamental to the biology of these molecules is how they come together and interact. Atomica captures these molecular interactions at the atomic scale with a geometric graph neural network. This network is pre-trained on over 2 million interaction complexes, capturing how proteins, peptides, small molecules, RNA, DNA, and ions interact. With Atomica, we can adapt it for many applications, including state-of-the-art RNA 3D structure to function annotation, cross-modality comparison of protein-protein interactions and their inhibitors, and predicting cofactors for protein pockets across the proteome, of which we apply this to the dark proteome and experimentally confirm heme binding for 5 dark proteins. If you'd like to learn more, I'd love to see you at poster 34. Thank you.
Hi everyone, I'm Shirley. I'm a PhD student at the University of Washington. And today I'm presenting some work on quantifying inheritance of protein regulatory networks. And so our high-level question here is how can we quantify and estimate the inheritance of protein regulatory networks between mother and daughter yeast cells? Here we're concerned with yeast cells because they're a pretty nice model organism to understand cell fate outcomes. And so the data that we have at our disposal is live cell microscopy imaging that's collected over time. And then we also have 6 different proteins that are tagged fluorescently within the cells to track how they change over time. But the challenge here is that how do we accurately estimate both the mother and the daughter cells' protein regulatory networks? And so for that, we introduced our method, PR node, which is based off of a group lasso approach for estimating these networks as ordinary differential equations. And then finally, we also present an inheritance metric to try to understand how the regulatory network is being inherited. So if you're interested in learning more, please see me at poster 35. Thank you.
Hello everyone, my name is Xiang, and I'm at poster 37. So in this project, we present the CONCERT, which is a Gen 2 model for niche-aware perturbation prediction. CONCERT has a very flexible architecture, which can be equipped with 2D or 3D kernels to learn the propagation of perturbation on 2D or 3D tissue space. And the concept is a generative model. We can use it to impute the missing cells or spots on the tissue side, and then conduct the in silico perturbation on those imputed cells or spots. We can also use concert to disentangle the perturbation effect to the spatial effect and the non-spatial effect on the latent space. We also design some novel tasks for the spatial perturbation field, such as the patch perturbation, border perturbation, and niche perturbation. So I'm super happy to have a discussion with you if you're also interested in the perturbation modeling, spatial modeling, and the combination of them. Thank you.
Hello. As a rheumatologist, I'm really fascinated by B cells because killing them might be curing some of the autoimmune diseases that I treat. But as an immunologist, I find them challenging because they're really multifaceted. They're impacted not only by their developmental trajectory, but also by the environment and by their life cycle processes. But most of the tools we use to annotate them collapse them down to a single label, like a memory B cell. This motivated me to develop my tool, B cell annotator, or BCAT, to allow them to be multiple things at once, like a memory B cell that's proliferating. Specifically, BCAT is a basis of 62 reproducible and interpretable gene expression programs that I derived from a variety of multiple single-cell data sets. It can be used to help interpret the single-cell data to understand what the cells are and what they're doing, as well as features for downstream prediction tasks, and it performs quite well for predicting subset, isotype, somatic hypermutation status, and more. So please come learn more at my poster number 38.
Hi, my name is Pooja. I'm an undergrad at UC Berkeley, and I work in the Stoller Lab on activation domains. We've identified a lot of variants in patients, and a lot of these are variants of unknown significance. We don't know what they do in the cells, and we've identified a lot of these in activation domains, which are an intrinsically disordered region within transcription factors. We have a couple of predictors, deep learning neural networks, that are able to predict whether a sequence is an activation domain or not. And my goal was to see how these variants of uncertain significance change the predictions that these models make, and whether we can use these predictions to quantify what the effects of these variants would be. We found that the models were not able to predict the magnitude and the direction of the change in activity, but they've performed better at predicting just the magnitude of the change. If you want to learn more about what these models can do, or some of the model interpretability work that I've done, you can visit my poster at number 39. Thank you.
Hi, I think I'm the last one before lunch, so I'll keep this brief. I'd love to talk today about how we've been using, how we've been integrating math modeling and deep learning to improve treatment scheduling in metastatic cancers. The specific treatment context we've looked at is hormone therapies in prostate cancer, and there's been previous clinical data showing that introducing breaks in treatment can more than double the time to progression. But what really stands out to me in these waterfall plots is the heterogeneity in response we get in the trial cohort, and the fact that we've got small numbers of patients who are super responders and seem to be stably cycling on this therapy more than 5 years later, when the median time to progression for continuous therapy is only 14 months. We're really interested in being able to identify these patients in advance, and we've developed a suite of mathematical and machine learning approaches to do this based on data from their first treatment cycle alone. Thanks very much.